as much as we can. And one of the things that we have tried to do right now is to make sure that we are covering the state of care that was released by CQC, the Care Quality Commission, our regulator, on Friday. So much information there and so much to get through today, but I'm going to be joined by fantastic speakers and a wonderful panel. So I'm really lucky and really glad we could pull this together. And one of the things that I'm excited to really talk about is the fact that we're going to have a variety of people on, and we're going to kick off with Kate Terroni, who's the Chief Inspector of CQC, who you'll be very familiar with, and she's going to talk through the main themes of the State of Care report. So don't worry if you haven't read it yet. And also she's got a bit of an announcement on another document that's been published today. And then we've got a wonderful panel who we're going to be introducing, and we've got people such as Nicolas Key Mew, so we've got some care managers. We've got Jonathan Cunningham as well. We've got Mark Tops, who works in Learning Disability Service. And then we've got Jade Townson from UKHCA, Vic Raynor from the National Care Forum, Melanie Weatherley as well, talking about care associations and collaborations. Whew, a lot of people. We've had so many people, we've had to split the panel into two. And we really hope that the tech behaves. So do stick with us. As many of you who follow us will know, my name's Sophie Chester-Glynn, and I'm the director at Coproduce Care, which we set up around about a year ago in order to just make sure that social care had a more in-depth platform to talk about these issues. I'm also a care manager, a director of an organisation that supports people with learning disabilities and does home care. So I'm really interested in the issues that we face every day, and COVID has just thrown so much at the industry, and I, for one, am just in awe of our staff and of everyone who's been involved. Just another reminder as well, it is Black History Month. So Coproduce Care on our live streams, we've also been doing quite a few live streams looking at inequalities, race and social care. And we've had quite a few different speakers. Last night we had Sedi Frederick and Trisha Pereira, who worked on the BAME advisory group to the Social Care COVID-19 task force. I was also part of that task force. So if you missed it, don't worry, go onto our YouTube. It's there, you can watch it back. And also if you want to look at anything else that's coming up for us as part of Black History Month, then you can do that again through our Facebook page or YouTube, and you'll be able to catch up with us there. So this is our fantastic set of panelists and who we'll be hearing from today. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that really stood out for me in the report. One of the things that was really sort of refreshing to see was how involved of the report was with involving so many different people. So around 31,000 reports were used in compiling the CQC's report, State of Care, 153 interviews via focus groups, and also including inspectors. And also the CQC used the feedback. If anybody fed through to them when they were asking for people's feedback on social media, through their website, they also use that information. So a lot of information has gone into this report. So it's very comprehensive, and it covers some of the political issues that we see at the moment, discussing around funding, commissioning, collaboration, and also just making it clear that it's not just about one part of the sector doing well. It's a whole tapestry of things that need to work together in order to really give people good quality personal care. So there's things about maternity services, GPs. I know in my services, sometimes we struggle to get GP appointments at the moment because everybody thinks it's to do with COVID, and that's not equal everywhere. So it recognises all of that. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to Kate about some of the things, the highlights of the report. And if we can just bring up, we've done a little graphic of some of the themes. What the report is like 100 pages long, and lots of people wouldn't have had time to look at it. But these are some of the themes that they've brought out. So the quality of care before the pandemic, the impact of the coronavirus, and of course collaboration, which I've mentioned before, and looking forward to the challenges of what's going on. But also we picked out some themes. I don't know if we can bring up a graphic on that, but inequalities was one of them. So not only just inequalities in terms of race and experience of people of colour, but also experiences of people with dementia versus learning disabilities. A lot about mental health services and hospitals, and there's a report that's out about that as well. And I suppose it's about reflecting on, us working in social care. We know exactly how these things are operating and the difficulties that we have. But having it in this report, it really highlights it to everybody that this is a real truth. It's not just hearsay. And I suppose it's something that we can use with our discussions with commissioners, or even lobbying our own MPs to say, this is a real problem within our industry. The regulator has spotted this. We really need to come together, whether it's local funding to do projects that you want to do as a provider or anything else. Definitely use what's in there, because it's well produced, it's very co-produced, and it's in depth. So that's enough of me babbling on, because I do babble. I'm going to introduce Kate. But before I do that, I must say to you, my team will tell me if I don't ask you, we are full of volunteers. We don't get paid for doing this. It's been a nightmare getting this together. All we ask is that you like our page if you're watching us on Facebook, that you subscribe to our YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube. It costs you nothing, but it does something crazy to the algorithms and means that more people see what we're talking about and can engage with the issues. Like it if you like it, makes us feel loved. And of course, if you want to know what's coming up, then do set a reminder, click the bell on YouTube, and then you're all done. That's all you're clicking done. So the last point is, please give us your comments as Kate is talking, as our panelists are talking. Just give us your comments as much as you can. Okay, then. So I'm going to introduce Kate. Hello, Kate.
Good morning, Sophie.
And morning to you. And how are you this morning?
Very well. It's been a very busy few weeks for everyone, but I'm very well, very pleased to be here.
Good. It's wonderful to have you here, and thank you for engaging with us. So first of all, really, I've given you a bit of an introduction. Maybe you could just talk about the report and the highlights for you from the State of Care report.
Certainly. So each year we produce our annual State of Care report, which is our reflections and insight about the quality of care people are receiving across health and social care providers in England. And our report this year has been a bit of a tale of two halves. One element of the report is focusing on the quality of services prior to the pandemic. And then, as you would expect, the second part focuses on the impact of the pandemic on the quality of care that people experience. And what we say in our report is actually COVID magnified the issues that were in the system prior to the pandemic. So a couple of key things. We know that people's experience of quality are significantly impacted by their ability to access it in a timely way, and the ability for those services providing support for that individual to come together and provide a kind of joined up way of supporting them. So access is absolutely critical. So in our report that we published last Friday, we talked about how much of health and social care quality has maintained or has improved. So it's of particular note and celebration that in adult social care, 85% of providers are now good or outstanding. And I always say that is particularly remarkable because of the challenges we face in adult social care. So all of us in the sector will know that there are two major challenges for us. One is the absence of a long-term sustainable funding solution. And the second is the need for a new deal for our social care workforce that we call for in our report this year. So absolutely remarkable in light of those challenges that social care providers are still being rated as good and outstanding at that level. Just a few areas that we highlight in the report, thinking wider than social care. So we note that there is work to do around maternity services. So 41% of maternity services were rated as requires improvement. We also had concerns about the quality of emergency care, emergency support, A&E departments. And then we focus on the impact and experience of people in mental health inpatient units. So we saw a deterioration in the quality of those services, with an increase of 5 to 14% of those services being rated as inadequate. And I'll come back to mental health inpatient users' experiences if I can in a little while. So we saw we went into the pandemic with some really good work happening within social care. The pandemic hit and we noticed some rapid acceleration of different ways of working. I think anyone who runs a business will know what the last eight months have been in terms of transforming the way you run your organisation, and that was reflected across health and social care as well. So things such as we saw a quick acceleration of GP access going online, going through telephone consultations, etc. And what we reflect in the report is this acceleration, this innovation is really positive and is to be celebrated, but it's critical as well that we take the time to understand what the impact is on all different people who need to access that care. So for example, having the ability to contact your GP and have consultations remotely might work really well for a large amount of the population. But actually, if you've got dementia, if you're an autistic person, if you're a person who experiences domestic violence, it is still, for some of those people, critical to have face-to-face consultation. So it's important, while we celebrate the acceleration of innovation, we also take the time to understand what the impact is on different groups of people when it comes to this. And then we also recognise in our report the natural focus at the beginning of the pandemic on everything that was COVID and was about acute care, so supporting hospitals to have enough acute capacity. However, we know that had a massive impact on the rest of the sector. So we know that the focus on freeing up of hospital beds had a significant impact on care homes. We know that the focus from health providers on the COVID work meant that there have been significant delays with people getting access to diagnostics, to screening, to cancer treatment, and all of that is absolutely essential. In our State of Care report, we call for no one to be left behind, that we ensure that we go back and look at what happened to people who weren't accessing health and care in a timely way because they were trying to do the right thing about ensuring that the focus was on supporting people through the pandemic. But it's critical that people are getting the support they need now. So if I just turn a bit to adult social care, if I may. So in adult social care, we celebrate best practice. We talk about the amount of innovation we've seen in the sector, which is to be celebrated. But we call for, as we have since 2015, the need for a long-term sustainable funding solution for social care. And we call for a new deal for the social care workforce. So we would all know that our social care workers out there do an absolutely outstanding job. And at the start of the pandemic, when much of the country was shutting down and going into lockdown, our social care workers were going out into people's homes, were going into care homes and a variety of other settings in an environment that probably felt pretty scary. And they were going out there ensuring people had their care and support needs met. We, in the first 10 weeks of the pandemic, the country came out every Thursday and clapped for carers, which is to be good. It's to be celebrated that the country's talked so much about social care, but that now needs to translate to a profession where people get the right terms, conditions, training, career pathways, so that a 17-year-old in school makes a decision that they want to go into social care as a profession and that they can stay in it and raise a family and get a mortgage and all that other good stuff. So that was our two messages for adult social care: long-term sustainable funding and a new deal for our fantastic social care workforce. And then one final point, if I may, Sophie. So we talked in the report about the deterioration of quality of inpatient units. Today, we published a report called Out of Sight, which is the accumulation of 2 years' worth of work of our looking into restrictive practice. So we went into 43 mental health inpatient units and into a variety of social care settings to look at how people with learning disabilities, autistic people, are how they experience restriction, segregation, and seclusion. And our report today is pretty hard-hitting. We co-produced it extensively with families and people who have experienced being inpatients themselves. So it's populated with personal stories about what the impact is of these people, for these people, of these types of services. And again, we flag three things. One, we say that restrictive practice has become a bit of a norm in certain settings, and actually restrictive practice is a failure of care and should not happen unless there are the most exceptional circumstances in which it needs to, an intervention needs to happen to keep someone safe from harming themselves or others. We reflect that people end up as inpatient units because of many early failings. So early failings in school, in being diagnosed, in families having the right support to provide that caring role for the person. And because of that, crisis point people reach crisis point. There isn't that consistent offer of community support around the country with specialist staffing and the right housing. And as a result of that, people end up a long way away from their home. And what we saw in these mental health inpatient units is we saw people going in and not having an assessment on admission. We saw an environment that exacerbated distress behaviour. We saw an absence of people receiving the right therapeutic treatment, and we didn't see an unrelenting focus on getting those people back to their normal place of residence. So we are making a series of recommendations in our report today for improved community support for people with learning disabilities and autistic people at the point of a crisis. We are calling for a recognition that restrictive practice is a failure of care. And we are looking for a ministerial oversight of this work and a single national commissioner to help really drive forward the ambition of transforming care, which I think many of us would say hasn't gone far enough to support the 2,000 people who, as of today, approximately 2,000 people as of today, are inpatient units where arguably a large number of those people could be supported out of a hospital setting. So I just wanted to share with you all about that publication. That's kind of hot off the press. It was published about an hour ago. You're on mute, Sophie.
Someone keeps putting me on mute. I was just saying, and now you can breathe. That was a lot you went through in 15 minutes or so. Thank you so much. We have a few questions I want to go through that people have submitted beforehand, but I've noticed people have put something in the chat already, and I do encourage people to do that, especially as we have our panelists coming up. So this first question from the chat, I'm going to take one for the chat and then some from our pre-submitted questions, is from Doris Jones, and she's asking about the inspection regime and addressing the relationship between inspectors and providers, and the fact that there are quite a few changes in inspectors, and of course 1 day of inspection in 3 years. It's quite a lot to inspect in a short period of time, and on the back of that, I do wonder, you talk about in the report that inspection, that actually when we look at services, we tend to just look at individual services, but they are part of this ecosystem. And I wonder whether there needs to be a real overhaul of the inspection system to consider the access to GP services, how much our local systems collaborate with individual providers, because obviously it's something you've identified in the report. So maybe you could comment on that.
Thank you, Sophie. So when at the beginning of the pandemic, we paused our regime of planned inspections, my inspectors focused their efforts on having supportive conversations with providers as they prepared for the pandemic, hopefully offering support, but also escalating issues that were particularly evident at the start of the pandemic about access to personal protective equipment, issues around testing, and staff being off sick or self-isolating. So we developed something called our emergency support framework, which was these structured ways of having conversations with providers, and we spoke to over 20,000 providers during that window. Whenever I had the opportunity to talk to providers, I asked them how they found that, and generally I've heard good feedback. So generally I've heard providers welcoming the more strong emphasis on support when it came to their relationship with their inspectors. We are at the moment having a conversation about the future strategy for CQC that will go live in May 2021. And we are thinking about the relationship between inspectors and providers, and I am really interested to hear your views about whether inspectors should be playing more of having more of a coaching role when it comes to working with providers, standing more shoulder to shoulder with providers, supporting them to get access to advice or information where there's a need to improve, working maybe more collaboratively. I think it might depend on different people's experiences, but I'm really keen to maintain people have a consistent experience of working adult to adult with their inspector, and our strategy is an opportunity to say, should we be going further, and actually should inspectors be in that more coaching improvement space, and would really welcome your engagement and feedback about that. And then your comment, Sophie, about systems. So as I say, we know from the work that Think Local Act Personal's done around the Making It Real statements that people's experiences of care, if they have complex needs, is often affected by how well services join up around them. But also we know in the start of the pandemic, some social care providers around the country talked about feeling abandoned by their health partners while the focus was shifted to hospitals and freeing up acute capacity. It's absolutely critical, if people are to be supported in the right place with the right staff and get the best outcomes, that no one is left alone to manage. So we are really keen, and we'll be saying this strongly, that actually care homes shouldn't be left without access to their GP, a clinical lead, a relationship with their local hospital, their dentist, because as you say, they are part of an ecosystem, the same with a home care provider. And again, when we think about our future strategy, my suggestion is that we will absolutely continue to hold individual providers to account for delivering high quality, safe care, but we will be placing an increasing focus on how providers collaborate with other providers in their place to ensure that care is joined up well around the person. So that increasing emphasis on partnership and systems to improve outcomes for people is something we're doing now. We're doing a series of provider collaboration reviews, but I suggest it will come out more strongly in our strategy. And again, now is the chance to influence that if people on this listening to this call thinks that that's what we should be doing as well.
Great. And there's ways that people can get in touch with CQC, and you're on social media, there's your website, and obviously providers through the portal can get involved. So it's get as much views and opinions as you can to CQC, because you are listening. Obviously, you do use them in your thinking and strategy. So that's probably a good message for people to engage with. Okay, so questions. First one, what is the CQC approach to assess how well providers are looking after their workforce, rewarding the best performers and supporting the ones who are lagging behind?
So I think it's been clear. We produce reports called Driving Improvement, where we look at what the ingredients are that enables a provider to improve their ratings, say from requires improvement to outstanding or from inadequate to good. And there are some key themes about what the ingredients are that make up a good or outstanding service. One of the main messages that comes out of our Driving Improvement reports is that a happy workforce equals high quality care. So actually a provider that is focused on having a happy, well-trained, well-engaged workforce is the right place to place your focus, because actually if you've got staff who are fulfilled, who have the right skills, they're going to be going out there delivering high quality care in people's homes or in other social care settings. We look at a provider's relationship with their workforce through the well-led key line of inquiry. So we are really keen to see providers evidence how they are providing that support, that training, that engagement of their workforce, so that their workers can go and deliver that outstanding care to people.
And I suppose, in a sense, you mentioned about the workforce, and there's some great things that you said on Radio 4, which we don't have time to play now, about having a new deal for not just funding, but also the workforce. So I suppose to extent, because I know I would love to give my employees a pay rise, I'd love to give them a bonus more often, but I'm so strapped with how much I'm given from commissioning. So the whole like we said before, the ecosystem, like politics, the government, they all kind of need to come together to help us help our workforce. And I think that was quite clear in the report as well.
Yeah, and obviously Skills for Care launched their report yesterday. I don't know whether I'm going to have all the figures to the front of my mind, but I think it still showed about 112,000 vacancies in the sector and turnover still at around 30%. And it's important that we may, in the coming weeks and months, see a slight increase in the numbers of people wanting to come and work in social care as a result of changes to other parts of the economy, so potential reductions in hospitality and retail. It's really critical that social care jobs aren't a job of last resort. They are a career that people choose to go into because they've got the right values and they want to make a real difference. So I would flag the Skills for Care, a really important report yesterday about workforce. And then the other comment I'd make, and I know you've got Jane on your panel later on this morning. I know when I meet with UKHCA and other providers, there's a very clear message that I hear that says we regulate the quality of care delivered by a provider, but providers feel very strongly that their ability to deliver high quality care is impacted by how they are commissioned, how their services are purchased. So I think commissioning plays a key ingredient in how services are designed, how they're delivered, and therefore the impact on people and the quality of care they experience. You're on mute.
Sorry, I've not been good at this today. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned commissioning, because that's something we're looking at next month. We're having a whole month kind of debating commissioning and the role of commissioning. And we've actually interviewed someone called Toby Lowe before on a new way of commissioning, which doesn't include outcomes. So that's also on our YouTube. I'm going to do one more question that's been submitted before. It's quite a long one, but we haven't chopped them up or changed them. It's as they are. So when will CQC start to work with organizations like ours so that we can use data to map the outcomes of care and support and address the huge gap in the unmet needs of BAME communities? And just a comment here, until there is some kind of partnership with our communities, the CQC and other organizations will not reach the people in the most deprived areas with the most unmet needs. So yeah, any comments on that, Kate?
So kind of a narrow comment first, and then maybe a broader comment. So we earlier on in the pandemic, when it was becoming apparent to us about the disproportionate impact on COVID on people from Black and minority ethnic groups within who are receiving care, we shared that data, and we called for action to be taken on the back of it. Data has almost never been as important as it has through the pandemic, and the need to very quickly pull together data that sits in lots of different places to analyse it, to understand it, and to use it to lead to action is probably one of my main learnings and reflections from the first wave of the pandemic. The broader point about access plays back a little bit to what I was saying about our state of care findings. So it's really important that we understand people's experiences about being able to access the right services at the right place and of the right quality. We have some visibility of it, but obviously our main role is looking at the quality of services when people get into it. Again, when we think about our new strategy, one of our pillars of our new strategy is thinking about people and how we regulate through the eyes of people. But it's also focusing more on inequalities and saying, actually, should we, in our role with our independent voice role, play an increasing focus on talking about people's experiences of trying to get in through the front door of services, as well as describing what the quality of those services are like once they are in that. And in order to do that impactfully, we're talking about, we had a stakeholder event on Friday when we launched State of Care, and we were talking a lot about the experience of carers. Carers UK shared their findings that an additional 4.5 million people identified as becoming carers during the pandemic. And again, there's a whole group of people that you could argue we don't have proper visibility of, about their experiences of not being able to get into services they need in a timely way. And I think it's by pooling our different knowledge and our different data sets to be able to describe what's happening to those groups of people, can we have a stronger voice about what's going on and what action needs to happen on the back of it.
Thank you, Kate. That was really helpful. And I know it's Black History Month, and I don't know if you've had time to think about this, but do you have any inspirational figure from Black history that springs to mind? I'm sort of asking everybody that comes on a major interview with us this month if they can think of anyone. But feel free to answer it a bit later if you're kind of buzzing with so many different names you can't think of one.
Well, I can come back to you about the historical one. I suppose someone who's in my sphere of people that I spend a lot of time with at the moment that has a huge impact on me is Clinton, from the chair of Think Local Act Personal. And Clinton is someone who I hold in such high esteem. He is someone who's experienced services himself, and he speaks so eloquently about how we need to work differently so he says things like, good quality social care helps people to have a life and not a service. So someone who's Black, who is an inspiration for me, who is in my life now, in my working life now, is Clinton, and I would want to celebrate what he brings to social care and challenge to our way of thinking.
And it's funny you should say that, because we are speaking with Clinton next week. So if anybody wanted to just subscribe and join in the conversation, I'm a big fan of Clinton. Also be joined by Dudley Sayer on our live stream next week. So please do get involved. You just need to subscribe, and then people will be able to join. Okay, so we're going to bring in our panelists now. But while we do, we have a few thoughts about some of the topics that they might want to cover, and these are some of them. So if you have any questions or any thoughts about what you might want them to talk about, then please do put them in the chat, and we'll try as much as we can to address those. So we should have everybody in now. Hello everyone. Hi. Great. So we've got everyone in. So I might be worth just the first 30 seconds for Mark, Vic and John just to introduce themselves. Can we start with Mark?
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Mark. I'm a registered manager for a learning disability and mental health care home.
Lovely. And Vic? You might just need to unmute Vic. But while we're doing that, we will move on to John.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's Jonathan here. I'm registered manager of Bechdel Park Nursing Home for 34 gorgeous people here, and also for Rosebank Care for learning disabilities. And we've got 17 lovelies there. I'm also the chair of the Care Managers Inner Circle with over 3,000 members. It's an online support group.
It is, and it's very popular and it's very vibrant, and we've had you on before and you play the ukulele and it's brilliant. I'm not going to ask you to play it tonight though, so today even, so you're all right. So inspection, that was one of the first themes we thought we'd talk about, and obviously we've kind of covered it already a little bit. But I wondered, in terms of your own experiences, Mark and Jonathan, of inspection, what's worked well, what maybe could work even better, considering all of the things that the State of Care report has highlighted. I'm very much in the thought of thinking how we need to involve the other ecosystem of social care and how they support us, and so, but maybe you have other thoughts on inspection. From your point of view, Mark, you've run a small learning disability service. How has inspection been working for you, and what do you think could be maybe improved in light of the State of Care report?
Yeah, I've always had really positive experiences of inspections, and I welcome them into my care home. I see them as an audit tool, something that I can learn from, and the inspections are every 2-3 years. I'd welcome them to be yearly. I think it's very hard as a small independent care home. We don't have kind of the big HR companies and quality teams, and I'm part of Jonathan's Facebook group, and anything. So when you talked earlier, Kate, about the CQC being mentors, I really welcome that. That would be something that I'm sure so many managers in care homes right now would really appreciate and would welcome. I think sometimes from a learning disability home compared to elderly homes on inspections, I find things that are in kind of outstanding reports for elderly when they talk about things like, we had a fresh fruit and vegetable cart once a week, and that's kind of highlighted as outstanding. But in a learning disability home, that's the norm. We have fresh fruit and veg every day. And sometimes I find it hard that some things that learning disability providers are doing every day as something that is normal sometimes doesn't highlight in our reports. So I don't know whether that's just because whether what you're marking against for learning disability compared to elderly, or whether it's just that the inspector might not have necessarily any expertise in the learning disability field if they're kind of cross-working. I don't know.
Thank you for that, Mark. But while you think on that, Kate, I'm just going to come to Jonathan on his experiences, because you've got the best of both worlds, if you like. You also have older people services, and you support people with learning disabilities, so you can do that comparison. I don't know whether you have inspectors who are specialised in those areas that supports you, like Mark was suggesting, or you have a different experience.
No, I agree with Mark. I mean, it's all down to the relationship with your inspector. I'm always amazed by some homes and providers that don't know the name of their inspector. And I said, well, that's entirely your fault. It is you to also, imbue and enhance the relationship. We were doing a live video every single day over the pandemic, over 4.5 months. We copy in every post our inspector. So our inspector is someone who is a smashing guy. Both, it just so happens to be both for Birkdale Park, same individual, and Rosebank. So they know us. We're not a closed. We're exact opposite. We're a very open community, and everything and every aspect of our world is completely inspected. In fact, I over-report, as Mike will tell you. Everything gets reported. I do feel though that I've got slightly unease about the inspector becoming your friend, your mentor friend. I can see the advantages, and certainly they've got this huge experience of going around and seeing best, the good, the bad, the indifferent. At the end of the day, the regulators, the regulator, they're not there to be your mate. They're not there to be your friend. They're there to drive quality and make sure that people are safeguarded. But I can see that there's possibly a new role for them. I've got to say, Kate, first and foremost, congratulations on the report. And whilst we can all sort of do mutual backslapping, it's an impressive piece of work of 113 pages. The only thing I would say is I'm slightly disappointed that it talks in terms of it's a story of the pandemic. And there's nothing in there that surprised me. It talks about the Herculean efforts in terms of acute trusts and social care. But the last chapter, which is the one which is the most important, I felt it fell short. There's a massive opportunity here to say, this is what we need now for social care. This is what we need. And I felt it was politically sensitively written, not to maybe upset the apple cart. You're in an incredible position to say, no, we can do more. The inspections, I felt right at the very start. The ESFs, yeah, absolutely. But if I'm a closed culture, I'm going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. You're not going to come into me, but I'm going to become more of a closed culture. I'm going to put the curtain up even more. There are some providers which are absolutely shocking, who won't be on this call, that won't be on any of the webinars, that won't be members of our inner circle or co-managers. They're just not even going to feature. And I know, it's all right with hindsight, but, I would have had did you have a vanguard of people with PPE? I just felt that CQC put the doors up. COVID says no, there's no inspections, and eventually we'll start phoning people. Whereas that's the time to absolutely get in there, and with people with PPE saying, COVID or no COVID, just like A&E, just like all these other providers who are actually fighting on the front line. I'd want to see inspectors on the front line in there at those super high risk. And I felt that the providers out there are still at massive risk. They haven't been inspected. They've flannelled the inspectorates. And I feel that there's a lost opportunity here.
I need to just let Kate respond to that. There's a lot in there, so people do give your comments on anything that Mark and Jonathan has said. Vic, I'm going to come to you after Kate's had a chance to sort of reflect on those comments from both Mark and Jonathan.
Okay, so if I start off with Mark and just talk a bit about improvement. So I think the question about inspector as coach is one that people have different opinions on, and that's why our conversation about what our strategy should be in this area is a genuine conversation that says, where do you think we should be on that spectrum? So some people, a bit like Jonathan, feel that it should be a very distinct role. Your inspector is your regulator, they're kind of over here. I think for other people, so I always think about there was a provider on a call I did early on when we were thinking about this, who was a young woman who'd become a registered manager of a requires improvement care home in a part of the country where her local authority didn't have a quality monitoring team or effort. She wasn't part of a big organisation with that audit function, with that quality function, and she was floundering, and she said, where do I go for improvement? So I suppose that's my driver, is that everyone gets good and outstanding care, and there's something for me about what's the safety net that scoops up those providers who don't have access to it. I mean, you could say there's a lot of free support out there, but sometimes I guess people don't know where to go. So there's a genuine conversation to be had about what do you think it would look like if an inspector had more of a coaching role. Do you think that's a space we should be in? Please discuss. Just if I can respond to some of Jonathan's points. So we never stopped crossing the threshold when the risk required it. So the focus at the beginning was around support, having those conversations with providers, escalating issues to government around PPE testing, etc. But we carried on going out and doing inspections in smaller numbers in those first few months and increasing numbers since. So as of now, we've done about 1,300 physical inspections since the start of the pandemic. And in addition to going out and doing risks, we're doing some focus work around infection prevention control inspections as well, to help shine a spotlight on best practice when it comes to providers doing that also. So we have continued to cross the threshold. I am worried about closed cultures, Jonathan. So what's evident in the restraint, seclusion and segregation work that we published today, as with many other reports that have been published, we know that closed cultures can happen anywhere. It's a state of mind, but we also know that certain models of care are more at risk of developing closed cultures. And for me, we've learned a huge amount through the pandemic about how we can do more with the different streams of intelligence we've got. So we did a big push on, we did a Because We All Care campaign with Healthwatch England to encourage people giving feedback about their care, and about 50% of our inspections have been triggered by that feedback. So there's a huge amount we can get from intelligence, but most of us would say that still in many scenarios nothing beats crossing the threshold, and nothing beats sitting and just immersing yourself in a service, chatting to people, trying to do activities instead of just sitting down and having a 5-minute conversation with someone who receives care who's never met you before, etc. So I am worried about closed cultures, and we are doing lots of work on it about how we can get better as the regulator about identifying when a closed culture might be occurring, and how we might need to adapt our way of inspecting those services so that we can really get under the skin of what it feels like for people receiving care there.
Thanks for that, Kate. And I think the jury is out in terms of whether you should be close to your inspector or have it at arm's length. People have different opinions. And of course, we'd hope that at some point with all these discussions, we'd get some kind of report maybe from CQC on how things might change. Vic, in your services, let's just see, we've got your sound, hopefully. But my question really is just for you to bring out whether what you heard from Jonathan and Mark, who are both obviously care managers and close to the ground, is something that you're hearing from people in your organizations. Yeah. Oh, I think we've lost the sound on Vic. And we'll come back to you, Vic, maybe in the second panel. I'm going to take you out the stream and let my team see if they can work on your sound. But one of the things I wanted to just pick up on, Kate, is something that I've been wondering. Is there actually a place for to go back at all to ratings, considering what was in the report with the fact that we are dependent on the system to do good care, and it's just so diverse? Is there a place for ratings at all, especially the outstanding rating?
So let's have a conversation about it. We were talking about it yesterday within the organisation. I think the ratings are established, they're recognised. I think they do have a value and a currency with members of the public, particularly when it comes to social care. So I wonder whether ratings are as, so if you're thinking, if you need an acute hospital admission, you're probably going to go to your nearest A&E department. If you're thinking about arranging home care for a member of your family, you probably will take the time to read all the reports and make a decision, often based on what our rating is about whether a service is good or outstanding. So I think there is a place for ratings. I know I've heard from many providers comments such as the rating of good, that there can be quite a spectrum of quality within the rating of good. So do people want to have a conversation about whether that should be split out more? I think we are interested in a conversation that says, can your rating only change as a result of a physical visit from an inspector? So historically, we would go out and inspect services based on a frequency of what your previous rating was. Since the pandemic, when we go out now and cross the threshold, it's much more focused and targeted, and we're producing shorter reports. I think if you were a member of the public, you would probably want us to have an always-on view of quality and risk. So you might want something that isn't a 2.5-year-old inspection report. You might want a view from the regulator about what's going on in that service now. And how might we do that? So how might we use information from Give Feedback on Care, whistleblowing, more conversations and with registered managers, shorter inspection visits? How might we have provide the public with more of a current view about the quality of services? And might there be an appetite for decoupling a rating change with a physical inspection? Is something that I don't know the answer to, but I would really like to hear your colleagues' thoughts about that as well.
Good, thank you so much. We've run out of time for this panel. I know people are itching to, Jonathan, I can see you're itching to get back in. I would just add though that obviously you're open to, you're all ears, you want to hear from people. Once you've had that feedback from everybody, when do you think you will come to a decision about these issues? Is there a
so we're having like a pre-consultation conversation during autumn. So we've got it's our Citizens Lab. It's our digital platform that we talk to providers and stakeholders about various publications, and our strategy conversations up there now. So this is the opportunity to influence it before we do a formal consultation launch in January, and the new strategy goes live in May. So this is the chance to get in, and if you want something to look radically different, or actually you think that instead of having the 4 ratings, you should have a scale point from 1 to 100, where providers can move up and down that rating depending on their latest quality monitoring visit from the local authority or the number of complaints or whatever it might be. Let's have a discussion about that now ahead of the formal consultation that happens in January.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I know, Jonathan, you're itching to get back in, but if you can hold on, we will, I know Kate has to leave us now, but we will bring everyone back in at the top of the hour just for final reflections. So I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me today, both of Mark and Jonathan, and of course Kate, for your time today. Thank you so much. We're going to move.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the second panel now. Whilst we do the switch over, these are some themes we thought that the second set of panelists might want to discuss with us. Obviously, they can comment back to anything that we have just been talking to Kate, Mark, and Jonathan about, and we will. There we go. Try and bring Vic in as well. And then we're going to have carry on the discussion. Please do fill the chat box. I know you have been already. We will get round to them. So welcome. We've got Jane Townson, Melanie Weatherley, Nicolas Key Mew, and of course, Vic Raynor. So welcome all. And we'll do what we did before with the other panel. And can you just, in sort of 10 seconds, just introduce yourselves so everybody knows who you are? Can I start with Jane?
Morning, Sophie and everyone. I'm Jane Townson, Chief Executive of the United Kingdom Home Care Association. We represent and support providers of care in people's own homes.
Great. And Melanie?
Hi, my name's Melanie Weatherley. I'm the chair of the Care Association Alliance, which brings together local care associations who in turn represent care providers of all sorts and sizes in all different settings.
Great. And Nicolas?
Morning, everyone. I'm Nicolas Key Mew. I just recently joined Oakland Care. I'm a care home manager in Enfield.
Great. So lovely to have so many care managers on this. I love it. And Vic, we'll just try you one last time. Can we get your sound?
I don't know. Can you hear me now? Yeah?
We
Okay.
can hear you. Brilliant.
So, I am Vic Rayner. I'm the Executive Director of an organisation called the National Care Forum, which works with not-for-profit care providers.
Great. First of all, I wanted to start off with what was our themes again? Inspection, demographics, equalities, and collaboration. Okay, so inspection. We kind of were getting into the flow of that when we had to swap over. Everyone's gotten a view on inspection, and there's lots going on in the chat. But from your experience of organisations that you represent, Jane, any thoughts from what we discussed just now with Kate, and obviously keeping the focus on the state of care and what the themes that it highlights? How can inspection help care providers, I suppose, in this challenging time?
Well, as Kate mentioned, whenever UKHCA meets with her and colleagues, we raise the fact that commissioning practices have a dramatic influence on quality of care, in home care especially, but also in care homes. And that isn't taken into account. You know, if you're only paid £13.68 an hour, let's say, for home care, which doesn't even cover properly the cost of national living wage and employment on costs, how can you afford to train your staff, to develop careers, to have pay differentials, to implement technology that will improve outcomes for people? So we are pushing for government to change the legislation to allow CQC to take a wider view. And as they talk about in their report, when they've looked across systems, they can see that in some areas it's much easier for everybody to operate than in others, where there's good collaboration, there's good leadership, there's good communication. What they don't do in the report, which we're really disappointed about, is give us any detail and point to actual practical things that can be done to make, to improve.
Thanks for that. Very succinct. Melanie, can I move on to you? Any thoughts of inspection and how that can support providers?
I think similar to what Jane said and what was talked about in the past session, there's not really a lot of point in inspecting individual services in isolation, because none of us work in isolation. If our health service is not in a good space, then however hard we try, we can't get the right health support for the people that we support. Commissioning plays a major part, particularly my day job is home care, so I absolutely endorse what Jane was saying. And I think CQC need to do more of looking across the locality. Through ICSs and through other changes, we're being asked to deliver health and care in a coordinated, place-based way, and that seems to be the right thing to do. So logically, inspection would follow, I would have thought, particularly if inspection is to drive improvement and not just to tick regulatory boxes. So I was really pleased to hear Kate talking about that possibility.
Absolutely. And I've always been of the point of view that I think commissioning should be inspected. I've never understood why that's never been inspected. I think it's outside of the remit of the CQC. I think it's legislatively things would need to change, but I absolutely think that to drive an inspection of the whole sector is much fairer to individual providers. Vic, can I come to you for some views on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting to me is Kate talked about how the report shone a light on all the kind of existing fractures that were there, under COVID, that were there already, lack of funding, commissioning challenges, etc. I mean, I think it also, COVID has shone a light on all the fractures that are there within the inspection process. And I think the bit that we were looking for was some more reflection within the report around that too. And I think that's problematic. I mean, has been raised about the kind of siloing. So there were some really clear kind of examples of problems that appeared very quickly within COVID. Now, one of those was about the really, very rapid application of DNARs blanket DNARs on care homes. It's a really shocking kind of practice that happened very quickly. And I mean, in the context of CQC, yes, they did react and respond when the issues were raised from the provider perspective, but they're inspecting, you know, all the parties involved in that. And I think that there is, you know, they did get involved and they did challenge, but I think it's not taking the role which I think it needed to, certainly within the pandemic, of having that really early oversight and using that in a reactive and proactive way that would change situations. I think it's great to come out, you know, once a year and say these are the problems that are there, but they've been talking about the sector being at a tipping point, and, you know, I can't remember the next year's analogy, but, you know, these are not a new set of stories. Absolutely, it's important that they add their voice to that, but I think it's really important that they also take, you know, think about how it's certainly in that kind of crisis mode, they could play a much more active role in terms of shifting some of those systems, you know, as things are happening. Because what we found is that very often they were the people who had the most up-to-date information about what was happening during the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think there's definitely something to be said about sharing those good stories. And Mark said earlier about feeling very underwhelmed by some of the things that he read in service reports, which were rated as outstanding. How do we get this really good quality information sharing about the stuff that we're doing out there, because it is full of doom and gloom, a lot of it. Nicolas, I know I can come to you for any good news on what you're doing, because you're doing amazing things in your services. But on this topic of inspection, and then I think we're going to jump to collaboration after this, but in terms of inspection, what maybe you've had some experiences of how it's worked well for you, or have some ideas on anything people have said?
Yeah, I think for me, I've been quite lucky to have a good inspector. A bit like what my colleague Jonathan said, it's about having a good relationship with the inspectors. However, I think that the inspectors are very short. I do feel pity for them, because they will apologize. They will say they couldn't reply to our emails, they couldn't reply to our phone call because they were busy. However, I think as well with the inspection, it takes too long for a care home to be inspected, because some great care homes, like we know that our care home is outstanding, and we wait for that inspection to happen, but it takes long, it takes 2 years, 3 years. When we have the inspection, they will come like one day to inspect like 80-bed care home. We want to show them off what we do best. The staff want to talk about what they've done. The residents want to talk to the inspectors, but they are short, so a lack of time, so they don't really have time to sit down and speak to the family members. So I think it's something that the CQC need to look in the future, because for outstanding, all care homes should be outstanding, especially for caring. So we need like that, the buddy system as well, to help managers who requires improvement, new managers. I was quite lucky to be part of the NCF with Vic, the Rising Star. I'm also part of Skills for Care. I'm also part of Jonathan Inner Circle. So this group has really helped me during the pandemic, because we had really suffered from March till maybe June, July. Now we're going through the second pandemic. A lot of managers, we do need some support. We do need, that extra support from our inspectors to praise us, and also to coach us as well what we need to improve and how to help us.
Lovely, thank you. And I think that is a brilliant point, that actually there's some really good groups out there that really help each other, and maybe that the CQC's role is limited, but maybe there's a role in signposting people who are struggling to these peer support groups for providers, as well as everything else. I want to jump to a collaboration now, and I'm going to come to Melanie, because there's a lot about in the report around the fact that where organizations have collaborated with their ICSs or with families or friends or whatever, then there's been some really positive outcomes for people in social care and support. Excuse me. So from your point of view, Melanie, I know you've got some great examples in terms of as part of a care association, how collaboration has worked from you. Can you comment on how that's worked in your area?
Yeah, I think before I go into the example, I think collaborations worked really, really well amongst different provider organisations. I probably see Jane and Vic at least twice a week on a Zoom or a team call. And I think the collaboration between the voices of the different parts of the sector has enabled us to move along the road to where we want to go. Not as far as I know Vic would like us to be, but at least we're working together on that. But locally in Lincolnshire, we had good relationships across the health and care system and have had for a while. And at the beginning of the pandemic, that really showed. I was at the first LRF meeting in January as a representative of the care sector, delivery sector, and we've been involved right throughout and even up to now. And I think there were some practical things we could do. The CCG wanted all care homes to take observations of residents, so they paid for the kit. They asked the Care Association to get out there and support people to put it in place. So now any doctor can look at the stats for any of their patients who are in care homes through the cloud. As a result of that, our care staff actually now feel able to ring the doctor and say, doctor or district nurse, this is what we've done. This is what we need you to do. So I think collaboration is absolutely key to getting us through this second wave, because even if the disease is less prevalent or less damaging, we're all tired. Our managers are absolutely exhausted. And so if we don't work together, we won't get through the winter. And I think it's really that simple. If we work together, we will make it through winter. And if we don't, we won't.
And I think that's working together, not just between providers, but also between local authorities opening the doors, of CCGs opening the doors, because very often I find I'm constantly saying to our local CCGs, please just give us a seat at the table and we can help you solve solutions. But it's very much, well, you're social care, we're health, and we'll make the decisions. It's tough. Jane, what are your thoughts on collaboration, any type of collaboration?
Well, obviously, it's really important. And one of the things that I've really been struck by is just how much home care providers have worked together locally. Early on, they were sharing PPE when people were struggling to get hold of things. And we run webinars for our members. And last week, we had one about workforce. And there was so much positive feedback about one of our smaller members talking about what they are doing to support their workforce. And I noticed in the chat that several people, Katie, Jewel and others, commented that providers prefer to learn from other providers rather than from the CQC. So creating opportunities for that to happen, celebrating best practice, learning from abroad as well, is really, really important. And I think the best systems, I used to be a provider in Somerset, and the council there was good at pulling together the hospital, the providers, other players in the system. The voluntary sector is really important down there, the GPs as well, getting everyone to work together with the same aims. So there's more work than we've all got the workforce for, so we don't really need to compete.
Yeah, that's true. This is a very good point. Vic, have you got any pointers on collaboration, maybe picking up on something Melanie might have said?
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely important, and NCF and the members have worked very closely together through all of this, and working as part of the Care Provider Alliance, which has been really important in that way. But I think what's also been helpful is, I think, as Jane says, some of those kind of broader alliances becoming really essential. So we've been working closely with organisations like Age UK, Relatives and Residents Association. We were able to produce some really quick guidance with relatives and residents around communication and how important that was during the pandemic. We did some really interesting work with which you wouldn't normally be in my sphere of expertise, around kind of funerals, working with funeral directors, thinking about how funerals could be, how undertakers could work with care homes in the midst of all the pandemic. So I think some really important alliances have been built in that way. And I think, care, we would always say care is at the heart of communities. And I think that care providers can and you know, I've seen some amazing examples from members can model that, and Nicolas being a great kind of example of that, can model that really essentially within their communities. What's been very difficult is, you know, within the midst of a pandemic, those who are particularly focused on sort of residential premises have found that much more difficult to do some of the intergenerational and other exciting kind of work they've been prepared to do before. But people have found some incredible workarounds for that, with sort of, you know, bringing church services virtually into homes, keeping connected with schools and all sorts of things. And care has to remain as part of that community. And it's great, and it's really important to speak with some of those strategic stakeholders. But at the end of the day, it'll be the community that holds care at its heart, and it's the community we need to make sure we remain connected with.
And community is definitely something that was also mentioned in the report, so they did pick up on that. But I'm really interested in the fact that I'm going to bring back some of our panelists that we had before. I know, Jonathan, you stayed on, and Mark as well, but do feel free. I know we were going to finish at 11, so if any of you do need to leave, then do drop out. Vic, I think you're having to.
Yeah, I'm afraid I've got to go, but thank you very much.
No, okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Good. So if anyone can stay on for another 5 minutes. Oh, good. So we've got everybody in. Yes, I think that's good. So I was quite interested, actually, which I wasn't expecting, was some of you were actually a bit critical of the report, to saying I was hoping for more than that was in it. But I don't know whether we hope for too much from these reports, because obviously CQC is on a bit of a tightrope with what they can say, or whether there's another way that we can get our voices heard. Jonathan, I thought that you were itching to come back when you were on the panel with Kate earlier. Have you got any thoughts on that, or anything else you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I just felt there's a lost opportunity. And we can all engage in mutual backslapping and how fantastic we all are. You know, when someone comes into my home and, you know, to critically assess it and do an audit, I say, look, I know about my rickshaw. I know that, you know, I said, I want to know the stuff that does not work. I want to be ultra uber critical on our systems and processes, because I want to improve. And I felt there's a lost opportunity there with CQC, that it didn't look about the review process. It didn't look, you know, in terms of self-scrutiny about itself. And as much as Kate, you know, she's doing a fantastic job, you know, what you know, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. But I felt there's a huge, it was a nice little narrative and a nice little story on COVID and how fantastic we've all been and the Herculean efforts. It didn't say, though, we've learned from this, let's shake the tree. We've got an opportunity, you know, we're not going to have an opportunity like this again to say, right, here we can build up now. We can fundamentally shake the social care tree. So funding, right, this is what is demanded now from the regulator. We could not get, Mark and I could not get swabs into our learning disabilities homes only until about 6 weeks ago. It was absolutely abhorrent. And yet I had CQC inspectors saying, we agree with you, Jonathan. I was safeguarding it. We agree with you. What the hell then was the regulator doing when we were absolutely desperate to get those swabs? And I'm sure they were doing their best. I'm sure that, but there's a lot of criticism there. You know, there should have been a vanguard to know that there's 44,000 providers out there, and yet they've done 1,000 inspections. Come on. You know,
and you know, home care is even lower down their priority list, and they keep talking about crossing the threshold, but they never crossed the threshold properly in home care, even before the pandemic. And actually, as some of the film crews have shown for the national media, you know, you can take an iPhone and go in and talk to people receiving services. You can talk to care workers. So our challenge to CQC is, why aren't they doing more of that? And I think, you know, they hold a lot of data. There could have been a lot more rigorous data analysis in that report rather than just a narrative.
They talk about closed culture. I felt CQC itself is a closed culture.
Mm-hmm. Strong words. Nicolas, do you have any views on this?
Yes, I think there's still time to work together, because, you know, our elderly, our resident lives matter. Because the CQC is, I don't think they're interested with our occupancy. A lot of care homes, home care has been affected with occupancy. We want to maybe to show to the people in the public, in the media, that some care homes are great. We're doing a great job for infection control. We're making sure that our residents, our staff, everyone are well protected. and also maybe to get more support from them, and also if they can speed up their infection control interviews, their visits, so that we can show that we are safe, so that people can go to our care homes, can come to our care homes and feel safe as well. So we really need them to start, do the inspection.
Mark, I wonder whether there's something to do with funding for CQC. They just don't have the funding to get people out, to get inspectors out, like Jane was suggesting. The media can get somebody out straight away and use phones to inspect people, or whether you think it's a culture issue. Do you have any opinion on that? Obviously, we're very far removed from that, but it might be something that you've thought of before. I just need to unmute you. Can someone unmute Mark?
Oh, I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a funding point of view, I can't see why inspectors aren't in services unless they're all on furlough. I'm sure they must still be working. I think for me, exactly what Jane said, there's no reason why we can't use modern technology, an iPhone, a tablet, to walk around our services. They could speak to staff. I speak to a lot of managers that still haven't had the infection control telephone calls. I know I haven't had a telephone call, but then there's managers that are having them weekly. So there seems to be a lot of kind of inconsistency across the services. I think for me, like Nicolas said, the CQC seemed to have just dropped off. I was phoning the support line, nobody ever returned any calls. I know Jonathan says you should know who your inspector is. I personally don't. We had one up until 2 years ago, and then we kind of bounced around. But no amount of emails and phone calls, we don't get told who our inspector is, and it would be great to know. And I'm sure if I'm experiencing that, I'm not going to be the only one. And I think, touching on what Jane said, I think supported living, domiciliary care, it has truly been left behind with the CQC. And I know that I've been campaigning for testing, but it's only just starting to happen in domiciliary care. And, it's minority of services. It's not across the board. And I think, we need to make sure that all services are tested, all care staff are eligible for testing. And I think, I've seen questions on the comments page about why aren't the CQC inspectors tested? And, they're going from home to home, and it's vital to keep, our residents safe.
Absolutely. And Melanie, from your care associations that you're in touch with, are you finding the same sort of issues and almost feeling a little bit abandoned by the regulator, or just feeling that they're not getting enough support, or that not giving social care enough of a voice during the pandemic, waiting for a report to come out?
I think it depends on the locality. Locally, our inspection manager for our area attends the Registered Managers Network calls that we do every week. Most weeks he comes to the provider calls once a month, and he is part of the community. He's spoken with us with the CCG when they looked at changing the discharge pathway. I know in other areas of the country that's been the case, and in some cases no one would know who the locality manager was. So I think we do need to, I think in the report what is missing is they do say what's wrong. What would have been good would have been some indication of how that could be improved. And maybe that's not what the state of care report is for, but if it isn't, we need a different report that says this is what we learnt during the pandemic and this is what we're going to keep hold of. A lot of our staff stepped up to the mark and did things that they would never have dreamt of doing before, particularly in home care where they're completely on their own. And there is a risk that we will all go back into our silos and those jobs will be taken away from them, which again, I think is not good for them. It's not good for our workforce generally, because they will go with the tasks. So I would really like CQC with their overview to say, okay, this was the state of care and this is how we're going to make the state of care better by next year. But that needs to be co-produced. It needs to have TLAP, it needs to have local authority, it needs to have providers and managers on, because I do think we have a fabulous opportunity to take what we've done in this first wave of the pandemic and use that to drive forward. Because our workforce, we were told in January and February that we would need mutual aid teams from the local authorities. No, we didn't. Our staff carried on coming to work. They moved into care homes in some cases if they needed to. And clapping for them is great, but can we pay them, please? And can we give them a career path? And I know that is in the report, and it's in the report from Jeremy Hunt's committee, but we owe it to them. They carried on with no PPE, no testing, no recognition. We as leaders of that sector need to do something to recognise that.
Absolutely. And I think it's just wide, it's political. It's, you know, I almost feel from this that we all could sit down for a month, even though we don't have that time, but we could produce a real meaty report with recommendations. That's what I'd love to see, involving all of our organisations, to say this is what we need, and that goes straight to government. Because we know what we need. They engage with us here and there and everywhere. I feel it's outside of CQC's remit. They've done as best as they can in the report. They've tried to plug what we need, which is helpful. And maybe we use that with discussions with our locality managers, our social care CCGs and all that. We really have run over, and I'm so happy that you all have stayed on. It's been really fruitful, and I hope everyone else has found it fruitful. And I feel we could just speak for another hour. But can I just go through all of you for any final thoughts on the report or anything on social care, or if you want to plug anything that you're up to in the next few weeks? Can I start with Jane?
Just to say that the Health and Social Care Select Committee published their report on social care funding and workforce today, which is worth a read. And we're going to continue to push for that additional funding. They've suggested an extra 7 billion per annum, but also to focus more on the workforce, which is the key to everything in the care sector. Without the workforce, we have no sector. So we really must support them and give them the fair recognition and reward that they deserve.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that's out, because we actually did do a submission. We got 400 responses on a survey, and we did a submission. I know you did, I know Skills for Care did, and we all put into that report. So I'm looking forward to reading that. Thank you for that, Jane. Melanie?
I think I would endorse what Jane said about the workforce. As care associations, what we're trying to do up and down the country is take the best practice from each local area, share it with the other local areas. So if you're not working with your local association and your sector trade association and your registered managers groupings, I would say go out there and get the peer support, because it is fantastic to know that there are other people, and often it's little things that you learn from other providers or other managers that makes your service better and makes your workforce feeling more supported.
Great. So go out there, find your support networks, don't suffer in silence, and don't suffer alone. Thank you, Melanie. Nicolas, can I come to you, please?
I think like what Melanie said is seek support if you need, but also I would say that for managers as well, you know, there's plenty of support. If you need someone to talk, join Jonathan's inner circle, there's a lot of support, and also speak out as well, because our resident lives matter, and that's what we want.
Thank you. That's a great message. Mark, can I come to you for some final thoughts?
Yes, I think just reiterating what everybody said is make sure you take care of your own well-being. You know, if you haven't got your own well-being, then you can't support everybody else. And, you know, I think managers, deputy managers, seniors are taking on so much more than they are probably used to or ever thought they would. And I think, you know, I love campaigning for change. And I think, you know, if you're watching this and you're a manager of a service and you don't agree with guidance, or you don't, you know, you aren't getting tested, is then speak out, use the media. You know, social care's never been at the forefront like it is now. And I think unless we speak out and we highlight that, it's never going to change.
That's some wonderful takeaways, and I absolutely agree with you. Speak out. In our local area, we've engaged MPs, we've engaged our councillors. They're all elected for us, so that's their job. So make sure they know. Don't assume that they know. Make sure they know what's going on. A colleague and I did a session on how to get your questions in Parliament, how to engage with your MPs. That was only part of the Care Summit. I think we should do that again to encourage people to speak out more, because you will be surprised how little they get what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we really need to help them to know that. And lastly, but not least, Jonathan, final thoughts from you, please.
Yeah, Sophie, first and foremost, a huge thanks to you and your team. I mean, this has been fabulous, and it's only through. I love how slick it is. and a huge thank you. There's a lot of effort behind the scenes. I think first and foremost, whilst it goes without saying, the Herculean efforts across all of social care has just been absolutely immense. But I think there is an opportunity now. And I think Care Quality Commission, they need a red team. They need to get people who are not going to do this mutual backslapping of how fantastic everyone's been. We know that the collapse have now stopped. We now need to be taking time with a critical view, and they need critical voices within that to shape the future of the Care Quality Commission. That's the only way they're going to improve. Finally, if you've got any obviously viewers on today, then please join the Care Managers Inner Circle. It's completely free. It's a lovely family to support each other, share, and for us all to develop. Once again, Sophie, many thanks for today.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure having you all on. We're all so very, very busy. Thank you all for participating, and good luck, and hopefully we'll see you again. So I'm going to bring everybody out, and just to close up, and to say that I hope you've really enjoyed this. We've been really lucky to have so many people engaged. I know everyone's working flat out. Some fantastic messages about looking after yourselves as managers, as people working in social care, reaching out to your networks. Jonathan's network is great. Do have local networks within your areas as well. Speaking to your MPs, emailing your local councillors, letting them know what you're going through. And of course, engaging as much as you can and supporting each other. And at one point, sometime, we'll all be able to just give each other a big hug. And I can't wait for that, because I feel like we all need that. But thanks for joining us, and we very much hope that you share what you've seen today. You can just share this exact link. You can watch it back on this same link you're watching it now. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That just helps more people see what you've seen just now. And like us if you thought it was good. I know we had a few bit of hiccups, but we made it. And thank you to my team as well, because this looks like it's seamless, but it really is quite hard to get the tech right. So thank you to them. So good luck, everyone, with the rest of your week, and we hope that you've enjoyed today. Take care.